The biggest piece of advice I'd give myself, it would to be just to relax, to calm down and trust the process.
Good evening, everyone. It's Vrushangi Shah with the Fellowship Review through the American Journal of Healthcare Strategy. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Mahee Patel. Mahee, thank you for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited to jump into your journey. Of course, you're still currently a fellow, and so I'm excited to not only highlight your educational and internship journey, but also, maybe a lesser known fellowship site perhaps. And so before we get into all the fun, why don't you go ahead and just give a brief overview and tell our listeners who you are, where you're from, and where you are currently?
Yeah, sounds good. I'm Mahee. I'm originally from Wisconsin, completed my undergrad there, went to state school at UW Madison, but completed my graduate degree at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. So huge move to the South and decided to stay there since currently I'm doing my fellowship at Apex Health Solutions in Houston, Texas.
I love to hear it. And for our listeners that may not be familiar, I just want to highlight the caliber of both your undergraduate and graduate program. University of Wisconsin at Madison is an incredible program, and UAB is very, very reputable, especially in the health admin space. So really excited to jump in. Let's start with UAB. What made you pick that grad school out of all the options that you have? And overall, what was your experience like?
Yeah. So when I was applying to grad school, it was towards the end of COVID time. So some things were kind of in person and some things were a little bit still virtual. And UAB was the only grad program that I interviewed at that had an in-person interview, and it made all the difference for me. The MHA world, as we know, is pretty small and culture means everything. And I thought that if I was going to be spending upwards of every day with a group of around 30 people, I'd really want to fit in. And my interview at UAB was it was so much fun. It didn't even feel like an interview. I loved the culture of not only the classmates, but the faculty, and it really stood out. So I made the right decision too. My experience there was amazing. So
Yeah, I love to hear that. And a couple things I'd like to highlight that, you said that it was towards the end of COVID. And so I definitely think like there's a lot of credit to give to you of moving all the way from like basically the northernmost part of the US all the way down south. One thing I do want to ask, how was that transition? Madison, and then also being in Wisconsin, the cold weather, and then moving to Alabama, huge change. So share a little bit about kind of what was different about being in Alabama.
It was super scary. I'm not going to lie. If most of my immediate family is in Wisconsin, even though Madison is 2 hours away from home, it was only 30 minutes away from my aunt. I've always lived very close to family. Wisconsin is home, and I've spent like all my life there until I decided to go to UAB, and it was really daunting, but my future, my career was worth it. And I'm so glad that I didn't let those little doubts of what if I make no friends, or what if I hate it, or what if the South is way different. I want to go back home. Like, what if it's the wrong decision? I'm glad that I didn't let those little what if situations play too much importance on my decision making, because I honestly made the best friends ever at UAB, and I didn't feel far from family at all, because the friends that I made in Birmingham felt like family. It was. In terms of the difference between the North and the South, I think it's overplayed. There's definitely a cultural difference in terms of Southern charm is very real. People are super nice here, but I don't know. People are people anywhere, and it wasn't I was expecting more Southern accents than I interacted with. Not everybody speaks with a Southern drawl in the South, so that was interesting. But Birmingham is a great city, super fun, lots to do. And UAB, again, the program, I was able to meet such cool people, and I think that made all the difference in that. The location doesn't play as much of a factor as much as the people do, and I really really appreciate all the people that I met in my class. So yeah, it was
Love
a
to
good.
hear it. And, you know, of course, you were a grad student, and it seems like you made the most of your graduate school experience. But another thing we kind of touched base on offline that I really want to highlight is your internship with the Mayo Clinic. And so, kind of, would you be able to share what the process was like acquiring that internship and then how it kind of played out?
Yeah, so I applied to Mayo Clinic, not on a whim. Obviously, it was a well thought out decision, but I never thought that it would land in an internship. I honestly, we were spoken to from an alum from Cleveland Clinic, and hearing more about Cleveland Clinic's model. Obviously, Mayo Clinic is a competitor, but also very similar to their model. And so, really interested in those AMCs that interact with those high acuity patients, doing really innovative medicine. And so, I was at a point in my career where I didn't really know where I wanted to do my career moving forward, and so wanted to use the time to explore in spaces that I haven't had exposure to yet. And so I was used to large academic medical centers in terms of UAB has a workforce program that we do as a part of our first year, as well as some of my undergraduate experiences were internships at larger hospital systems. And so I knew that I liked that setting, but definitely wanted to try something new and was drawn towards the innovation and exciting stuff that Mayo Clinic does. I talked to an alum of UAB that did the internship previously. She had nothing but great things to say. And so I applied. The way that the Mayo Clinic internship and fellowship work is that you apply to the system as a whole, and then you pref your locations, but at the end of the day, they assign you the location along with your offer. And so it just ended up that I was at the health system in Wisconsin, which was home. And so people are like, oh, when they look at my resume, they're like, oh, did you choose Wisconsin? No, it just worked out that way. But I love the health system. It was such a great experience. I have nothing but glowing reviews to give. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really want to highlight the importance for our listeners for tapping on alumni, because I think you've mentioned it now, a couple different people that you were able to touch base with, and they were able to give you kind of their experience. So, really want to highlight to our listeners the importance of connecting with alumni, connecting with professors who can then connect you with their former students. Because, that hearing from a student who was in your shoes, having gone down a path, I feel like is much more real than like reading on a website what an internship entails. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And I think the blessing of healthcare administration is that when you finish your graduate program, or when you're done with the academic portion of your graduate program, you have a lot of options as far as fellowship, consulting, getting a traditional job, or even pursuing higher education even more than your master's. What was it about fellowships that really caught your eye, and what was it that you would say was your why? Why a fellowship? Why go down this rigorous path?
Yeah, so I'm a first generation student as well as a first generation American. And so I feel like at times I rely on my professional network more than somebody that, might get that guidance from other places. And a fellowship spoke to me because it is a guaranteed way to get mentorship and guidance and such privileged experiences that you wouldn't otherwise get following a more traditional career trajectory. And it was so attractive to me, not only as somebody that identifies as a lifelong learner. I am so blessed to have a fellowship experience that allows me to explore all those curiosities and continue to be a learner even as I transition out of my official title as a student, and also allow me to build those strong connections that don't only feel professional and also like mend into that personal space. I think having a fellowship where you get the time to, throughout at least the course of a year, I feel like most fellowships are at least a year long, build that professional and personal connection with a mentor that can not only guide you in your career but propel you and speak about you at tables that you don't have a seat at yet, I think is invaluable. And so that's definitely what spoke to me, not only as somebody that is curious and loves to learn, but especially as a first generation student, wanting to utilize the power that a strong professional network can yield in your career. So yeah.
Yeah, what a great response. And you highlighted some incredible things. Having a privilege to do a fellowship, I think that's so real. It's so competitive that it is a privilege to be in that position at a health system. And then it's so funny because the episode that I recorded yesterday, my guest said something very similar to you. And, she said, I had the honor of having a mentor who said my name in rooms where I was not present. And I think the fellowship does that for you if you're able to find and connect with the right people. So thank you for highlighting that. And digging a little bit deeper into your fellowship cycle, to the extent that you want to share, what was kind of the search process like for you? How did you narrow down where you were going to apply? And then also, how did you stay on track with your applications?
Great question. I think staying on track with applications is like one of the hardest things that I had to deal with. The Excel sheet just kept getting more convoluted as different experiences happened. But I had a master Excel sheet that I updated almost daily as I was going through the fellowship experience. A thing about UAB is that a fellowship is required. So the program does give you a lot of support in finding a fellowship, and they also host what's called Preceptors Conference, where I want to say like 30 to 40 organizations come to UAB to recruit us as well. And so I obviously did my research on those orgs that came to UAB, but I spent more time researching the orgs that didn't come to UAB just because I knew that that would take I wanted to take the extra step to make sure that I was doing my research for those orgs as well. I think that there's varying advice that you get for the amount of fellowships that you should apply to. Some people have crazy numbers like 20s. I am somebody that is a strong believer in quality over quantity. And I want to say, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say I applied to around 10. I wanted to be really intentional. And even for myself, I didn't want to confuse myself with too many options. Obviously, throughout the process, some of those decisions will be made for you as you continue to progress. But knowing myself, I didn't want to overwhelm myself with having too many different options. And something that really helped for me was connecting with fellows beforehand, and getting their authentic and honest experience about their fellowship experience was game changing for me. And that the information that you can find online, while it is valuable, is, it's generic. And the best way to gauge if you yourself are a cultural fit is if you can get along with the person that is doing the role currently. Then that's a good marker of, okay, like I can see myself, I can envision myself having a similar experience to them. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being intentional about how many you apply to and even the location, right? Because, like, you're going to do your fellowship and you're going to go to work, but you're also going to live in that city. So I think, like, again, just doing a lot of your research, which it seems like you did, and then picking is so, so important. I also think the way you highlighted keeping yourself on track, whether it was researching organizations that weren't going to be there, as well as the Excel, is like very core to how fellows usually act. So it totally checks out that you were able to secure a fellowship. Um, and another kind of question I want to ask is interviews, right? Interviews can be overwhelming. They can be a pretty tough part of the fellowship cycle. Many, if not most organizations have their first round and then, a second and or third and final round. And oftentimes, those are full day events. You're meeting, the topmost leadership. So, what was interviewing like for you? Anything that, you learned or anything that surprised you during the fellowship interview process?
Honestly, I had so much fun interviewing. It was so fun not only to get to see all the sites that I interviewed at, but also to meet different students. I think it's really easy to view the MHA world as your class because you spend so much time with them. And then you go to a conference like ACHE, or you meet people from different programs at on-site interviews, and you realize that people say that the MHA world is small, and that is true, but it is also bigger than you think it is. And meeting those other people, like I had a great time interviewing, and I think the reason that I was able to enjoy the experience so much was because of some advice that I received, that once you make it to the on-site interview, you can believe that you're qualified for the job, right? Like at that point, it's down to what's a cultural fit, because so much of what you do in a fellowship is based off of your personality, and if that meshes with the personality of the organization, because that is just a large part of what an administrative career is relationship building, communication, your ability to be flexible and learn and, fit into the team and the culture of an organization. And so those technical skills that we're worried about in terms of qualification, I think, are weeded out throughout the process early on. And by the time you make it to the on-site, it is a personality fit. And when you are trying to gauge that, you are interviewing the organization as much as they're interviewing you, and keeping that in mind in terms of, to get the most authentic and successful fellowship experience, you should just show up as your most authentic self to the interview. It took a lot of pressure off my shoulders, and in reminding myself to have fun, I think also created a more lighthearted atmosphere with the people that I was interviewing with as well, because it can be so nerve-wracking to be in a room all day with what's seen as your competition. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in everything happens for a reason. And I still talk to some of the people that I met with on on-sites, and they're all so happy at the organizations that they ended up with, and things work out. And just trusting the process and trying to have fun, I think, will make you stand out as somebody that, can be their most authentic selves. Because I think nerves, while everybody has them, can, be a differentiating factor of, this person is confident in themselves and trust their ability to be a successful fellow, versus somebody that can let their nerves, take that opportunity away from them. So yeah.
Yeah, incredible, incredible advice on all of that. And, just to give my kind of 2 cents, you are absolutely right. I had two separate health system CEOs tell me that you're here. And it means you're more than qualified to have the job. It really is about fit and whether this is mutually beneficial. So I just want to throw that out there, that not only, you've obviously heard that piece of advice, but even when I was doing my interviews, I also got very similar advice, so I can definitely say it's true. And so of course you arrive at Apex, and so before we get into your experience as the fellow, could you share with our listeners a little bit about the logistics around the fellowship? So if you could highlight, is it 1 year, 2 year? Is it project based? Do you have co-fellows, or is it just you? And if you could just give us an overview of the fellowship itself, that would be great.
Yeah, so the fellowship is pretty new at Apex, as Apex is a new organization itself. It was founded in 2019, and so it's a growth stage company. But we've had a couple of fellows before. The fellowship is a year long, and you have a lot of autonomy at a new company to make the experience what you want it to be. And so I decided to make it rotational. The previous fellow had a more project-based fellowship, but I think that's a unique opportunity and privilege of the fellowship, is that you get to make it your experience. Yeah, so I'm rotating through each of the functional pillars at Apex. It's historically been a year long. I don't know why it would be longer than that, but if somebody wanted to, I think the sky is the limit at Apex, and you can ask for, the experience that you want, and leadership will work with you to get it. A little bit more about Apex. It's a managed service organization that works heavily in value-based care, and so it's a little bit more than consulting. When you think about consulting, it's you offer a solution, but at an MSO, you offer the people, the process, and the technology to handhold your partners throughout that implementation. And so you get to have pretty meaningful connections with the clients that you work with. And I've learned so much. So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely seems unique. I don't think I've actually ever heard of a fellowship that allows their fellows to pick rotation versus project based. So that's super cool. And remind me and our listeners, are you the only fellow, or do they pick multiple people?
I'm the only fellow. Yep.
Okay, okay, that's definitely also a very unique experience, and I know you've been there for several months now. So, any project or a rotation that had a project that you'd want to highlight, just to give our listeners an example of the type of work that you get to do?
Yeah, I think the most unique project that I was on that I didn't anticipate learning so much from was a regulatory project. When I was on it, I was like, I see the importance, I see the need, but I wasn't as exposed to what goes into compliance and regulatory projects of that nature. And so I helped actually build our clinical policy for our utilization management team. And that was so intimidating, but so gratifying in terms of the relationships I was able to build and the skills that I was able to build. I think the biggest thing that you learn in a fellowship is how to transition from that student or learner position into that leader that then delegates to people that are even senior to you. It was so intimidating making the project plan and delegating to VPs and telling them what to do. But it was such an important skill set for me in terms of not only forcing me to take my hand out of the bucket of doing everything and start delegating, but also start to shift the way that I built my executive presence in terms of, we are on a career path to become leaders. And so even though it might be intimidating, at one point you're going to have to shift into that role. And the fellowship definitely pushes you to do that much quicker than you think that you will. So yeah.
Absolutely, and I definitely think that all good fellowships push you, but they don't let you drown. That's what my preceptor during my fellowship always said, that we're going to challenge you, but we're not going to let you drown. We're not going to let you get so overwhelmed that you feel like there's no way out. And I know I appreciated him and that advice so much.
Agreed.
You know, tell us a little bit more. Do you have a assigned preceptor, and also what's mentorship like in this specific fellowship?
Yeah, I have a preceptor and an executive sponsor. So me and my preceptor meet weekly, and me and my executive sponsor meet bi-weekly. My preceptor is the person that I speak more on a daily basis in terms of, we have a weekly set up time to have a one-on-one, but she is so available to me, and we have a relationship where whatever I'm working on, whatever questions I have, I bounce those ideas back to her, and it's a safe space to fail. There's no dumb questions. She's the person that helps me not feel like I'm drowning, even if there might be an overwhelming time. And my executive sponsor is the person that I do a lot of future planning, goal setting with, in terms of what do I want my post fellowship career to look like, what are experiences that I should be seeking out to be successful as an early careerist, things of that nature. Obviously, those two conversations blend between preceptor and executive sponsor. It's not like there's only precedence to speak about one thing with each, but that's usually the tone of what those conversations go like, and really great culture at Apex in terms of the access that you get to leadership. I have a lot of informal mentors based off my rotations and having those working relationships. I don't think I've ever completed a rotation without the executive sponsor of that rotation not offering me to have continued mentorship throughout the rest of my fellowship experience. And so definitely a learning organization where people are excited and ready to build connections with you and be there for you regardless of if you're working directly for them. They're invested in your success as a person and not just as the position that you hold for them.
I love that. And I think mentorship is such a big part of why people do fellowships, and being able to have that safe space and connection with your mentor is so important. I know I definitely did with my preceptor, and, still do. And so I love to hear when fellows say, like, they are very available to me, and they're very, like, just there for me to support me and make sure, I'm doing well. So appreciate you sharing that. And kind of moving towards my last two questions, maybe a little bit more fun, but you've moved around, you've jumped around from the north to the south, and now kind of across from where you used to be for grad school. Tell our listeners what it is like living in Houston. Also, just anything that maybe surprised you or that you really love.
Houston is so fun. I will say it's a much wider city than I thought it was. You can drive for an hour and still be in Houston, and Houston traffic does not play. Like, it is a different ball game over here. I thought being close to Chicago and Atlanta prepared me, but no. But honestly, I love the city. The food scene here is insane. There's always things to do. I think that the reason that this was a attractive fellowship site for me was also because as a young person, I like to have a busy life outside of work as well. And being in a large city allows me to, play both roles of having an exciting time at work, but also have things to do outside of work. I'm a person that really values my relationships outside of healthcare as well. I think we have a tendency to always bring the conversation back to healthcare when you work at healthcare, and there's value in unplugging and interacting with people beyond just work and school. And Houston is a big enough city that allowed me to do that. It took a while to build friends. I think there's a learning curve to building friends post being in school, because all of a sudden not everybody that's the same age is in one location. You have to be more intentional about making friends. And so I actually joined an intramural kickball team. I was doing Pilates classes, doing the most to make friends, but the hard work paid off, and now I feel like I have a good social circle. But it did take a while, and it was a little frustrating that, like, not everybody that I knew lived in the same city anymore. But we have FaceTime, and I still keep in touch with all of my old friends. It's just a little bit more planning, but if you're in an HA degree, then you're probably a good planner anyways. So
Yeah, absolutely. I love to hear that. And kind of my final question, and I ask all my guests this, so definitely not a surprise to anyone that's listened to various episodes. Having acquired a fellowship successfully and now, almost, you know, being done with it, what is your advice? So either something you could have changed about your own journey, or just anything you want to tell a younger student who wants to go down this route. How do they become successful?
I think the biggest piece of advice I'd give myself, it would to be just to relax, to calm down, and trust the process. I think looking back on it, there was a lot of unnecessary worrying of what if situations, and even if things don't work out the way that you think they will, life has a funny way of pushing you in the right direction, even if you can't see it at the time. And so take a step back and look back at all you've accomplished thus far. This is just one more step. Like, of course, it's not going to be easy, but it's not impossible. And I think keeping a level head and staying true to who you are as a person, as well as who you are professionally, I think will take you a long way in terms of making sure that you're the most successful person that you can be moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And I just want to thank you for your time tonight. I think I shared this with you a little bit offline, but it's very important to me to highlight fellows from diverse backgrounds, diverse parts of the country, as well as fellowships that might be lesser known, or, not something that immediately comes to mind when people say fellowship. And so this has been so insightful. I'm really excited for people to listen to this episode. And again, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.